Look at how they massacred my boy. If you weren't scared of Ilia Topuria before tonight, you really should be. In just 4 short years, El Matador has risen up the ranks, demolished the 2 greatest fighters that have ever fought in his division, KO'd the unKO'able Max Holloway. This man is the modern embodiment of the no known weaknesses Vitor meme. And there is only one spooky conclusion to make this Halloween season after that performance. I'm Tommy from MMA On Point. A massive thank you to our channel Hall of Famers for supporting these post-show autopsies. And the boogeyman is real. Daniel Cormier at the end of the broadcast made such a perfect analogy for Topuria's instantly legendary victory over Max Holloway as his first defense after taking the title from Alexander Volkanovski. He said it would be like a light heavyweight coming in and beating himself and John Jones in back-to-back title fights via knockout. When you put it in that perspective, it's pretty absurd what Ilia has done at 145. And these were not washed legends who held on too long. He took the belt from Alex, ending his unbelievable run, and Holloway has looked as good as ever. In fact, he was having a great fight up to the point where he was not. I wasn't sure how I felt about Topuria up to this despite his unbelievable success thus far, but that one sealed it for me. Generational power getting that knockout on Max. And of course, he's incredibly well-rounded too, even if Joe Rogan was unaware of his ground game. I just really do not see any matchup that would be too problematic for him in his own division. And I think his aspirations for fights outside of it are entirely warranted. You know, just 3 weeks ago, I said to you on our very last autopsy video that Alex Pereira was the absolute lock for Fighter of the Year 2024, miles ahead of anybody else this year. Well, it's funny what can happen over the course of a month because I'm off that train entirely, beating 2 of the best fighters of all time in their prime via knockout, one of which had not been stopped in over a decade, and the other who had never been stopped, period. Ilia Topuria is the 2024 Fighter of the Year. I guess I just never thought anybody would knock out Max, but he did, and that certainly adds to his accomplishments this year. Alex is the most important fighter of 2024. That, I think, is a distinction that is solely his. He certainly made a massive impact this year in his 3 title victories at crucial junctions for the UFC. But the best fighter of the year is El Matador, and I won't be changing my mind again, I promise. Beating someone who is as popular as Holloway in the fashion that he did, in addition to his massive popularity in his home country, I think the UFC is going to lean heavily into Ilia in 2025, and I would not be surprised if he's headlining major cards against someone other than the next in line at 145. The potential star power here is huge, and considering the UFC is lacking in that department at the moment, the rise of Topuria, I'm sure, is a welcome one. Super fights aside, there are a bunch of matchups that would be a blast to watch at 145. Diego Lopez in particular right now. We could also do the Volk rematch at some point. They set that up at the end of the show. Those fights aside, there are enough interesting contenders for him to beat to really make a mark on the division he just took from the 2 greatest to ever compete in it. Whatever is next for the Matador, I'm sure it's going to be huge, and right now, I wouldn't pick a soul to beat him at featherweight. But as unbelievable as the end of UFC 308 was, a bunch of other stuff happened that we need to talk about. In particular, Khamzat Chimaev's absolute domination of Robert Whittaker. We have seen Bobby take on the best of the best at 185, and even though he's had some losses that were devastating, I have never seen him handled like that. He threw 2 punches total. He was controlled for all but 13 seconds of the fight, forced to tap almost instantly because this monster nearly tore his jaw off. It was one of the most shocking wins I've seen in some time, not in the least deadened by what happened directly after it in the main event. And if that doesn't put Khamzat at the top of your list of title contenders at 185, I don't know what to tell you. There were questions after he beat Usman, which I get it, Kamaru's up a division, but he was still an all-time great. Regardless, I think those questions were answered pretty well here. Beating someone like Whittaker in that fashion, there's not a matchup you could argue for that Boers wouldn't either be the favorite or a slight underdog going into it. I understand that you could argue Sean Strickland beat Dricus du Plessis, and so should be next after his win against Paulo Costa. But you cannot tell me right now there's more interest in that fight than seeing Chimaev compete for the title. I would imagine a good amount of fans already feel like Khamzat is the best middleweight right now, given how odd the division has been and his skill set. Of course, there's an elephant in the room, and it has 2 heads. One, the guy is seemingly sick or unable to fight quite often, which is a problem when you're headlining an event and expected to be in championship bouts. The other issue is that I'm I'm not sure this guy is ever going to be able to fight in the United States again, which is fine for now, I guess, but how do you handle that if he's holding gold? Maybe it's possible, but the UFC is in a tricky spot. That said, after that fight, it's really hard to deny him a chance at gold, whether next for DDP or after a Strickland rematch. Speaking of fighters being denied chances at gold, it's time for Magomed Ankalaev to fight Poatan whenever it is that Alex defends his title again at 205. I understand that it's not impossible he fights in some other division next, but whenever he's throwing down at light heavyweight again, if it's not against Ankalaev, then what are we even doing? It only serves to diminish Pereira's legacy if he ends up fighting, I don't know, Alonzo Menefield next. No offense to Alonzo. I'm just saying it was clear-cut before he beat Rakic, and his performance against him was just the icing on the cake. I think the commentary team did a good job of focusing on his striking and the actual style he employs to make a future challenge more intriguing for fans. Very well done on their part, and I think a conscious move since they too know that he should be next. Alright, let's wrap up our discussion of 308 by running down some stats and handing out some awards. The UFC's 19th trip to Abu Dhabi saw 13 fights with 5 KO TKOs, 2 subs, and 6 decisions for a total cage time of 2 hours 15 minutes 2 seconds. When the smoke cleared, it was nearly all favorites. 12 in total took dubs, with just one dog defying the odds. Abusupyan Magomedov's third round submission would have netted you a massive payday if you bet on it, a plus 2,800 outcome. Real life pirate Shara Bullet moves to 15-0 with 12 KOs and scored the 11th ever spinning back fist knockout in the UFC, but without question the first double, and probably the last, earning him our just making shit up award. A brutal stat here, Dan Ige's loss to Lerone Murphy marks his 7th decision defeat out of his last 8 fights that have gone the distance. Scorecards absolutely hate that man. After his 13th straight in the division without a loss, Magomed Ankalaev has an average strikes absorbed per minute rate of 2.25, number 1 of any active fighter at 205 pounds. Hint hint, he doesn't get hit very much, might be relevant to his next fight. Nobody has ever submitted Bobby Nux until now, and Khamzat Chimaev now earned his 5th first round finish in the UFC, so for the sub, he gets the Jawbreaker award. It took 2,227 strikes over the course of 34 fights spanning 14 years to knock out Max Holloway for the first time, a legendary streak that I doubt will ever be beaten, and one of the most insane accomplishments this sport has ever had. As for the Matador, he scored knockdowns now in 5 straight fights and earned 5 straight performance bonuses. And that's the show. That's UFC 308 all cut up and examined. Of course, the real MVP, as always, is the editor Max Randall, who puts these post-pay-per-view videos together in record time every time. Please follow him on his socials and go check out his kick-ass YouTube channel. Another huge thank you to the Channel Hall of Famers. You are the best of the best with honors. Fight fans, the join button makes you a member too. Exclusive content awaits, so go check it out. Like and subscribe for autopsies after every pay-per-view and so much more. Let me know what you thought about 308 in the comments down below. Yes, I do read them. And thank you so much for watching. New York, New York, here we come.